Welcome.
Welcome to the Everything Podcast. I am your host, Chuck Manatee. And in today's episode, we are going to be continuing with Back to the Future Part 1, Part 2. I know that's confusing, but I'm doing Part 1 in 2 parts. So, just a quick briefer on the cast. It is Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Emmett Brown or Doc, Leah Thompson as Lorraine Baines or Lorraine McFly, Crispin Gloven as George McFly, Thomas F. Wilson as Biff Tannen, Claudia Wells as Jennifer Parker, and James Tolkien as Mr. Strickland. So Back to the Future Part 1 came out in 1985, has a runtime of 1 hour and 56 minutes. It was actually something I forgot to mention yesterday, but the director was Robert Zemeckis, and the music was done by Alan Silvestri. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because the music is absolutely fantastic. It really sets the stage for the movie. It was done amazingly. Steven Spielberg was actually involved in this as well. And like I said, the release date was, I said 1985, but it was the 3rd of July, 1985. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. So, where we left off yesterday is where Marty's picture was starting to disappear. So, specifically to that, it was actually his brother's head that was busy disappearing in the photo, as you remember the cliffhanger from yesterday. So, this is because Marty's granddad hit him with the car instead of his father George, and that's where Lorraine had what you call the Florence Nightingale effect to fall in love with now Marty. So Doc and Marty have to try get Lorraine to fall in love with George by getting them to go to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. So this is where they kissed originally. So Marty meets up with George in the cafeteria, trying to get George to take Lorraine to the dance, and sees him writing a novel. Marty actually makes mention that he never knew his father did anything creative. Marty sees Biff in the cafeteria hitting on his mom, and actually almost gets into a fight with him after confronting Biff. Marty follows George home to try and convince him, and George says, "Not you or anyone from this planet can get me to go to this dance." So that gets Marty to spring a plan. He dresses up in that plutonium suit that he originally rocked up in 1955 with, and pretends to be Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, and will melt George's brain. So this of course scares him into going with Lorraine to the dance. George's first word mumble attempt at a diner to ask Lorraine goes not so good, let's say. So instead of words like destiny, he uses the words like density, so you can only imagine. He gets interrupted by Biff, who comes into the diner and gets tripped by Marty. Marty distracts him and punches Biff. Biff and his goons chase Marty through the street, and Marty outruns them on a skateboard. So if you remember last time, it set him up as a very good skateboarder. So he dodges them with some clever maneuvers. They almost ride over Marty with a car, but Marty lets the skateboard go underneath the car. He climbs over the middle of the car, and they ride right directly into a manure truck. So that's a clawback for some of the future Back to the Future reviews, so keep an eye out for the manure truck. So Marty gets back to Doc's place and sees Doc's watching the video from the night of the time travel. He interrupts Doc, seeing his own death. He wants to tell Doc, and Doc says he doesn't want to know anything about his own future. Doc has a model plan, so this is the plan obviously a model version of the plan of the night where he's trying to get Marty back to 1985. So basically from the clock tower there's a cable going down to the 2 poles, there's a cable across the 2 middles, and then obviously they have a little connecting hook in the back of the DeLorean, so that's supposed to be touching each other as the lightning goes, and that will send the 1.21 gigawatts into the DeLorean to get him back and give him the power to go back to the future. Lorraine knocks on Doc's shed after following Marty home and asks him to ask her out to the dance. So Marty hatches another plan. So his plan here is obviously to go to the dance, obviously force himself on his mom to some degree, making her uncomfortable, and then George would come to the rescue and kick Marty's butt, and then they would fall in love. So a funny part happens where Marty almost calls George dad while speaking about this plan, and then he corrects it with the word daddy-o, which was quite hilarious. Marty gives George important advice after George said he was scared about this plan. He says, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. Remember that, nice clawback. So while setting up the rig to get Marty back to 1985, this is when Marty goes back to Doc and is busy helping him there. Marty is obviously trying to explain to him what happens to him in the future, whatever the case is, and then sort of gets cut off immediately and lands up writing Doc a letter to warn him about the Libyans that kill him in the past, well, in the future, in his past, the future. It gets quite confusing. So it then cuts to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and playing on stage is Marvin Berry. That will be fun later. So you then see Marty and Lorraine pull up to the dance and then start the plan to make George a hero and get Lorraine to fall in love with him. However, Lorraine is drinking and smoking, and Marty actually reprimands her the whole time, saying about her drinking and smoking, like, oh, I didn't know you smoked, oh, I didn't know you drank. And she replies, you are beginning to sound just like my mother, which is actually hilarious because she is his mother. Lorraine kisses Marty, and in between that kiss she has a shocked look and says it felt like she was kissing her brother, which is also hilarious. So a nice little relationship between the two of them, which gets awfully weird. Biff gets to the car before George, which throws a spanner in the works. Biff gets in the car and starts to take advantage of Lorraine, while Biff's goons drag Marty away and lock him in the band's trunk. So George approaches the car and opens the door and is shocked and scared to find Biff. When he sees Biff, he almost loses his breath. He eventually plucks up the courage to tell Biff the words that he practiced to get his damn hands off of her. Biff then gets out the car, grabs George's hand and bends his hand behind his back while pushing Lorraine to the floor. Eventually George has an opening while Biff is laughing and being silly, and George punches and knocks Biff out. George asks Lorraine if she's okay and takes her hand and takes her to the dance, which is a beautiful moment. There is a problem though. So Marvin hurt his hand, the guy that was playing guitar on the stage, so he asked Marty if he could play. So Marty ends up playing guitar on the stage, which you know he can do from before. There's a guy, so while Lorraine and George are dancing on the dance floor, there's some horrible person who tries to interrupt them, and Marty starts to disappear. So as he's disappearing, he can't obviously play guitar well, but eventually George, because of the courage that he's plucked up from Biff, obviously bumps away this guy and then kisses Lorraine, and Marty eventually comes back from almost disappearing completely. So after that, the band asks Marty to play one more song, and he plays a rock song that is a bit, let's say, too new for 1955. It has all sorts of crazy solos like the hair band rock bands from the back in the 80s. So Marvin Berry phones Chuck Berry, which is the part that I said you must just look out for, saying, you know that sound you're looking for? Well, listen to this. So obviously Chuck Berry being a popular 50s rock artist, and that was his so-called cousin on the stage, and that's where he learned his sound. Marty sees George and Lorraine, and they're happy, and Lorraine asks Marty if it's okay for George to take her home. Marty says yes, and George thanks him for all the great advice. Marty rushes off to meet Doc by the clock tower, and to get back to 1985. Doc goes through the plan quickly. The car with the connecting hook has to hit the cable at the exact time the lightning strikes. Doc sees the letter Marty wrote earlier and tears it up, and not knowing about him being shot by the Libyans, so he doesn't find this information. Lightning strikes a nearby tree, knocking part of the cable down. Doc has to climb the tower, almost falling a few times. Marty tries to warn Doc, but Doc can't hear him because the tower is chiming. So Marty is forced to leave because he's running out of time. Marty lines up the DeLorean, and then the car doesn't want to start. Marty then hits his head on the steering wheel while trying to start the car, and it starts. So he has to floor it at this point, a lot harder because he's slightly behind schedule of the clock ringing that was in the car to tell him when to go. So Doc connects the cable and pulls out the other side of the cable by accident. Marty is hot on his way, and Doc doesn't have time and slides down the cable to the connection he needs to fix, and just makes it in time to connect it as the lightning strikes. Marty and the DeLorean are shot back to 1985. Obviously the connecting hook and the lightning hit at the exact same time, and the mission is then successful. So Doc screams with happiness, and Marty is back in 1985. Marty had sneakily set the time 10 minutes earlier so he could try save Doc's life. The DeLorean at this point doesn't want to start again, and Marty doesn't make it in time, and Doc gets shot as he got there. So Marty sees himself being chased and going to 1985, and the Libyans crashing their van in the chase, because obviously they chasing the car and they disappeared and they crashed into something. So Marty rushes to Doc and sees him on the floor, appearing to not be alive. Marty is crying, and Doc sits up next to him all of a sudden, and Marty's shocked and asks how. He had a bulletproof vest, and shows Marty the letter. Doc had pieced it back together, I beg your pardon. Marty wakes up at home and things are a little bit different. So his sister has a boutique, his brother's wearing a suit, his parents come back from tennis, and Biff is waxing the car. George unpacks his new book called A Match Made in Space, so he obviously started writing the novels. He then quotes Marty's advice: if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything, which is such a great clawback. So Marty sees a new truck his dad bought for him, and Jennifer asks him for a spin. But as that happens, Doc rocks up just out of the blue in a pumped out DeLorean with a new fueling system for the flux capacitor that doesn't need plutonium to work anymore, which he obviously got fitted in the future. He warns Jennifer and Marty that they need to come with him immediately to the future because something is wrong with their children. So as they line up the vehicle, or the DeLorean, Marty says they don't have enough road to reach 88 miles an hour. So Doc replies, roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Such a great line. Anyway, the DeLorean has had a conversion to fly in the future, as well as the fueling system for the flux capacitor. So they go away from the screen with the DeLorean and come rushing with a flying motion towards the screen, because now the DeLorean can fly. And that is how it ends, setting up Back to the Future 2. So I hope you enjoyed that review, and if you did, please show us some love by commenting below in the comment section. Please do comment any reviews that you'd like to see in future. We'd love to hear from you about what you'd like to, or like Ben to talk about. And besides that, again, please, if you liked it, please do like, share and subscribe this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.